Hello over there and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching L24 World Latest with me. I'm Abdul Qadar, and to the headlines. Ukrainian Interior Minister who visited Bucha on Tuesday revealed that dozens of bodies are still in homes and in the forests surrounding the city. Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the United Nations on Tuesday to remove Russia from the Security Council after Ukraine provided evidence of failings and atrocities by Russian troops. The economic capital of Sri Lanka lives under curfew in order to control the demonstrations against the president. Clashes between Palestinians and Zionist anti-police renewed the Bab al-Hamoud area in Al-Quds, and a number of Palestinian civilians were injured. And starting our news with the latest updates, European Union ambassadors to meet as the bloc considers further sanctions on Russia, including banning coal imports. Moscow says it wants to keep ties with the West open despite a series of diplomatic explosions. Kiev announces fresh attempt to evacuate citizens from the besieged southeastern port city of Mariupol. Pope Francis condemns atrocities in Ukraine, including massacres of Bucha. It seems that the shock of the discovery of the so many bodies last weekend in the city of Bucha near Kiev, where Ukraine accuses Russian forces of committing a massacre, is not over. Ukrainian Interior Minister Denis Montezersky, who visited Bucha on Tuesday, revealed that dozens of bodies are still in homes and in the forests surrounding the city. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the United Nations on Tuesday to remove Russia from Security Council, days after Ukraine provided evidence of killings and atrocities alleged committed by Russian troops. Zara Ferjani, watch follow.
In a video addressed to the United Nations on Tuesday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called to remove Russia from its place as a permanent member of the Security Council, where it holds veto power, arguing that it was time to reform the global peacekeeping body.
If you don't know how to make this decision, there are two things you can do. Either exclude Russia as an aggressor and initiator of the war so that it does not block decisions relating to its own aggression, then do everything possible to establish peace.
The Ukrainian president's speech was accompanied by harrowing images showing some of the massacres discovered in Ukrainian cities that were under Russian occupation. However, Russia insisted the images were staged.
I would simply like to take advantage of the virtual presence here of the President of Ukraine and address him directly. We now submit your conscience the groundless accusations against the Russian military, which are not confirmed by any eyewitnesses.
The United States agreed with Zelensky and called as well for Russia's suspension from the Human Rights Council.
Given the growing mountain of evidence, Russia should not have a position of authority in a body whose very purpose is to promote respect for human rights.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned of global fallout from the conflict in Ukraine.
Our analysis indicates that 74 developing countries with a total population of 1.2 billion people are particularly vulnerable to spiking food, energy and fertilizer costs.
There is no provision or mechanism to remove a permanent member of the Security Council written into the UN Charter. The 5 permanent members are Russia, the US, United Kingdom, France and China. Each permanent member holds a veto power to reject measures brought up for a vote on the Security Council.
In a new video, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky criticized the UN, saying that this is a provocation aimed at obstacling the investigation.
After what the world saw in Bucha, sanctions against Russia must be commensurate with the gravity of the occupiers' war crimes. Today, Kiev is the capital of world democracy, the capital of the struggle for freedom on the European continent. The UN is currently unable to perform the functions for which it was created.
The head of the Russian diplomacy, Sergei Lavrov, considers that the discovery of corpses in the Ukrainian city of Bucha is provocation aimed to stop the ongoing negotiations between Kiev and Moscow.
The question arises, what is the reason for this open and false provocation, the veracity of which is simply impossible to establish? We are led to believe that it serves to find a pretext to torpedo the negotiations. 3 days after the departure of our soldiers from the town of Bucha, a provocation was organized there. The one we are talking about today, we have every reason to believe that this one was done with the aim of diverting attention of the negotiations process.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ramtala Mamra, continues his tour aimed at settling the conflict in Ukraine. The head of the Algerian diplomacy met this Friday, April 5th, with the Ukrainian counterpart Dmitry Koliba. The meeting was held in the presence of the Foreign Minister of Jordan, Iraq, Sudan, Egypt, and the General Secretary of the Arab League.
We are tremendously concerned by the crisis and extremely worried by its implications at all levels, notably by its humanitarian consequences and the threats that it implies on the global peace and security landscape. We are here out of our firm conviction that we cannot remain indifferent to a major international crisis and opposing two friendly countries. We are here because we firmly believe in the virtues of diplomacy and dialogue to achieve peaceful and political solutions to problems, no matter how difficult or complicated they are.
During his press conference with Mr. Ramtala Mamra, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Mr. Dmitry Koliba, extended his sincere condolences to Algeria and in particular to the family of the late student Mohammed Abdul an Algerian student who died at the beginning of the war in Ukraine, and expressed the hope that the war would soon end so that Algerian students could return to their studies at Ukrainian universities in a better condition.
Speaking about our bilateral relations, I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere condolences to the family and relatives of the Algerian student who had been killed by Russian fire in the city of Kharkiv. When the war ends and when we restore our universities, Algerian students will be wholeheartedly welcomed back in Ukraine to continue their studies. And Ukraine is always happy to cooperate with Algeria in this and other fields. Thank you.
The U.S. Chief of Staff General Mark Milley says that there are many lessons to be learned from the Russian war in Ukraine regarding the future of the war, as he testified on the Ministry of Defense budget request for the 2023 fiscal year at the Capitol in Washington.
On the Ukrainian army, and you see the effects of mission command, decentralized operation, and that is working out extraordinarily well on the battlefield. The third piece, I would say, is focusing on that which gives you the best effect on a battlefield, which in this case has been anti-tank weapons and air defense weapons that deny the Russians the ability to maintain air supremacy or even achieve air superiority. So urban battle is going to dominate land combat in the future, and that will then also drive our use of helicopters, our use of radios, our use of tanks, armored vehicles, light infantry, dismounted light infantry, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and I've got a whole laundry list that we've been working with the Ukrainians on, but that's just the tip of the iceberg.
The Russian army claimed on Tuesday that it had shot down 2 Ukrainian helicopters trying to evacuate the leaders of nationalist troops defending the besieged port of Mariupol, while once again calling on those defenders to lay down their arms and leave the city via an agreed route toward the territory under control of Kiev.
This morning, April 5th, a new attempt by the Kiev regime to evacuate the leaders of the Azov nationalist battalion was foiled near Mariupol. Two Ukrainian Mi-8 helicopters trying to reach the city from the sea were shot down by the portable anti-aircraft missile systems. We have previously, on several occasions and through all available channels, handed over to the Kiev regime our proposals on the possibility of getting out of Mariupol. However, these proposals are constantly ignored by the Kiev regime, giving Kiev's a lack of interest in saving the lives of its military personnel.
Russian President Vladimir Putin proposed on Tuesday to monitor food deliveries to hostile countries in the Kremlin amid a wave of sanctions against Moscow that have consequences for many agricultural sectors. He also ordered to strengthen the production of agricultural equipment in Russia and assured that national food production fully covered the country's needs, while highlighting Russia's agricultural potential.
It is clear that this year, in a context of global food shortages, we will have to be more cautious in our food deliveries abroad, and in particular monitor the conditions of these exports to countries that are pursuing a hostile policy against us. Here we need to establish clear guidelines for import substitution and keep them clear in the very near future. Given the potential of the national agro-industrial complex, our science and our industry, we have every opportunity to do so.
Also, the Russian President Vladimir Putin has denounced the pressure exerted against the Russian giant Gazprom in Europe, stressing that nationalizing Russian assets is a double-edged sword.
The situation in the energy sector is worsening as a result of non-market, brute measures, including administrative pressure on our company Gazprom in some European countries. We are already hearing statements from official figures about the nationalization of some of our assets. We can go far like that. Let no one forget that this is a double-edged sword.
Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States, a grouping known as AUKUS, have agreed to cooperate on hypersonic weapons and electronic warfare capabilities. The leaders of the three countries have said the three countries set up the AUKUS Defense Alliance in September last year, including the sharing of nuclear-powered submarine technology in an agreement that sparked anger in China and upset France, which had a contract to sell diesel-powered submarines to Australia. Deserted streets, closed shops and armed troops deployed in the city of Colombo, the economic capital of Sri Lanka, lives under curfew like the rest of the country decree until Monday in order to control the escalation of the demonstration against the president due to a serious economic crisis, the worst since its independence. Ramadan in Palestine was renewed with the terror of another eruption of violence. For the fourth day in a row, clashes between Palestinians and Zionist entity police renewed in the Bab al-Amoud area in Al-Quds. The Palestinian Red Cross declared that a number of Palestinian civilians were injured. The details in this report by Nabil Khazini.
Ramadan atmosphere in Palestine is stained with fear of another outbreak of major violence. For the fourth consecutive day, clashes between Palestinians and Zionist entities police take place. The official Palestinian news agency reported that Zionist entity soldiers attacked the Palestinians in Bab al-Amoud square. After these renewed clashes, the Palestinian Red Crescent announced that a number of Palestinians were injured. The agency also confirmed that forces of the occupier attacked young people who were present in the area with sticks and tear gas and arrested 6 of them whose identities have not yet been known. Among them was a man with special needs. The Red Crescent said it dealt with 24 injuries during the confrontations with the occupation in Bab al-Amoud, Bab al-Sahira and Al-Isawiya town in occupied Al-Quds. Human rights organizations say Palestinians are excessively targeted by the occupiers' forces. But this is not their only suffering. Palestinians, although not hopeless, are worried about the growing indifference among the international community toward their plea for self-determination and a full recognition of their human, civil, and political rights.
Malian armed forces and associated foreign soldiers allegedly instantly executed an estimated 300 civilian men, some of them suspected terrorists, in the central Malian town of Moura in late March 2022. According to Human Rights Watch, the men were among those detained during a military operation that began on March 27th. The incident is the worst single atrocity reported in Mali's decade-long armed conflict.
We spoke with about 20 witnesses who described an operation last week, which lasted several days, in which a few hundred military personnel from both the Malian army as well as what were described as Russian soldiers parachuted into this town in central Mali, which is quasi-controlled by the jihadists. There were two exchanges of fire, and then they proceeded to arrest and detain hundreds of men who were in the town.
Sarajevo have marked the 30th anniversary of the start of the infamous siege by Serb forces during the Bosnian War by paying special tribute to the victims of Russia's attack on Ukraine. What was not stopped in 1919 in Bosnia is becoming even more visible across Europe and the world. Sarajevo Mayor Benjamin Karik lamented on Tuesday at a ceremony which took place in the National Library building, a symbol of the destruction during the siege of Sarajevo, which is now rebuilt. At the start of the commemoration devoted to the Bosnian capital resistance during the 44th month of siege, a minute of silence was observed in the tribute to the victims of war in Bosnia, but also innocent civilians killed in Ukraine. Peruvian President Pedro Castillo on Tuesday announced an early lifting of the curfew in Lima, intended to contain protesters by transporters over fuel prices, but which has drawn criticism and misunderstanding. More insights in this report.
Peruvian President Pedro Castillo announced an early lifting of the curfew in effect since down in Lima after thousands took to the streets to protest over fuel prices.
From now on, we will lift this curfew. It is appropriate to call on the Peruvian people to come down.
Standing alongside the Speaker of the Parliament, opponent Maria del Carmen Alva, and after a meeting with the parliamentarians, Castillo called for unity of powers.
We're moving to the office to sign and lift this immobility measure. Peru is not going through a good period, but it is the powers of the state that must resolve it. Here there is no first power or second power. We're the powers of the state that must occupy the country.
President Pedro Castillo affirmed that the measures taken are not against the people, but to protect the lives of his compatriots. The curfew had been in effect since down in the capital and the nearby port of Cayua, where 10 million people live. It was originally to be held until midnight. Its lifting was greeted with cries of joy by hundreds of demonstrators gathered not far from Parliament and several districts of the capital.
To a different matter now, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said that Pyongyang would respond with nuclear strikes if South Korea launched a primitive attack. Kim Jong, a senior North Korean official, issued two statements in response to South Korea's official commands. South Korea Defense Minister Seo Wook had said his country was capable of striking missile launch points in North Korea, prompting an angry reaction. The U.S. State Department has approved the potential sale of equipment, training, and other services worth of $95 million to support Taiwan's defense. The Pentagon said in a notification to Congress that the approval covers the training, planning, and field deployment, operation, maintenance, and sustainment of Patriot air defense system and associated equipment. This is the third arms package since U.S. President Joe Biden took office a year ago. Gallery at the Museum of Marseille brings memories close together about Emir Abdul Qadar, who is seen as a national hero in Algeria. Islam Seed reports.
A national hero for Algerians. Emir Abdul Qadar has always been personified in Algeria as a victorious fighter of the French colonial empire. An exhibition at the Museum of Marseille looks back on the many lives of this humanist Muslim thinker, with the ambition of bringing memories closer.
Emir Abdul Qadar, who is not only Emir, is a character who goes through the history of the 19th century, who is at the same time at first a young noble, pious, religious, who is destined rather to a life of scholarship, of spirituality, which became in fact, with the arrival of France in 1830, the leader of the resistance, the fighting leader.
The project of this exhibition was born from a meeting in 2019 between the president of Museum Jean-François Chuniet and Father Christian Delorme, the former parish priest of Minguettes near Lyon.
We need to advance to have figures that inspire us, and in the complicated world that is ours, no doubt the world is always complicated. But in a world where today there are so many tensions between the West and the East, between the Muslim world and the non-Muslim world, well, Abdul Qadar, no doubt, is a light, a beacon.
Many images of Emir Abdul Qadar are on display, including the first photo taken by photographer Gustave Le Gray in Amboise in 1851, as well as personal items, including a white kaftan. The exhibition presents nearly 250 works and documents in 5 sections, illustrating the life of Emir Abdul Qadar, coming from public and private French and Mediterranean collections.
And now to some football news. Liverpool took a big step toward the Champions League semi-finals with the 3-1 victory in the first leg of their quarter-final tie against Benfica. Liverpool took the idea when took the lead when Ibrahim Konate scored the first goal in the 70th minutes before Sadio Mane doubled the lead in the 34th minutes. The only goal from Benfica by Darwin Núñez was not enough for the Portuguese club, as the Reds' Luis Diaz scored the third for Liverpool 3 minutes after the end of the game.
I think everybody in the room agrees we could have scored more goals, maybe should have. Well, I said big compliment to Benfica, but anyway, the best player of Benfica was the goalie, probably. That says a lot. It's an away game in the Champions League in the quarterfinal. If that would be easy, something would be wrong with the competition. But it's a great competition, and Benfica didn't get the quarterfinal as a present. They came through an incredibly tough group and played against one of the most talented teams in Europe with Ajax, and here they are, and today they really want to go for it.
And in Up with Sport, let's have a reminder for our main stories. Ukrainian Interior Minister who visited Bucha on Tuesday revealed that dozens of bodies are still in homes and in the forests surrounding the city. Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the United Nations on Tuesday to remove Russia from the Security Council after Ukraine provided evidence of killings and atrocities by Russian troops. The economic capital of Sri Lanka lives under curfew in order to control the demonstrations against the president. Clashes between Palestinian and Zionist entity policy renewed in Bab al-Amoud area in Al-Quds, and a number of Palestinian civilians were injured. That's it for our program. Thank you for tuning in us with me, I'm Abdul Qadar. Till the next time. Bye-bye.